The woman standing on my doorstep had my engagement ring on her finger. Not a similar ring, my ring. The same vintage sapphire surrounded by diamonds that my husband had presented to me 18 months ago, swearing it was a one-of-a-kind antique he'd searched 6 months to find. I stared at her hand, then at her face, then at the sleeping toddler on her hip. She stared back at me, at my pregnant belly, at the wedding photo visible through the open door behind me. "You're Olivia," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm Rebecca Cole." She paused, and I watched her eyes fill with tears she was clearly fighting to hold back. "And I'm Marcus's wife. His real wife. His first wife. We need to talk before he gets home." I grabbed the door frame because my legs stopped working. The world tilted sideways. The baby inside me kicked hard, like even she knew something was terribly wrong. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. Rebecca looked at me with something that might have been pity. "I know, believe me, I know exactly how you're feeling right now. Can I come in? I have proof. I have everything, and you need to see it before he comes back and tries to explain this away." That's how I found out my entire marriage was a lie. Standing barefoot in my own doorway, 7 months pregnant with a man's child, while his actual wife balanced their toddler on her hip and handed me photographs of a wedding I'd never known existed. But let me go back to the beginning, because you need to understand how a reasonably intelligent, successful, 34-year-old woman ends up married to a man who was already married to someone else. How the red flags I should have seen became invisible under the weight of my own loneliness. My name is Olivia Ashford. I'm the owner of Magnolia Lane, a chain of artisan bakeries across North Carolina that my grandmother built from a single pie stand at a farmer's market 45 years ago. She started with nothing, a used card table, a handwritten sign, and recipes she'd learned from her own grandmother back in Georgia. By the time she passed 3 years ago, she'd built an empire. 12 locations, a commercial kitchen that supplied restaurants across the state, a catering business that handled the biggest weddings in Raleigh. She left me everything: the business, the properties, the family home where 4 generations of Ashford women had rolled out biscuit dough and built something from nothing. The whole operation was worth about $4 million. I didn't advertise that. I still showed up at 5 a.m. to check the ovens at our flagship location, still knew every employee by name, knew their kids' names, their coffee orders, their birthdays. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, bought my clothes at Target, wore the same 3 pairs of jeans in rotation. The money was security, not personality. But apparently, to certain kinds of men, I had a target painted on my back in letters 10 feet tall. I just couldn't see it. I was too busy making pies and missing my grandmother. I met Marcus Cole 2 years ago at a food industry conference in Charleston. I almost didn't go. I was exhausted from running the business alone, from the grief that still hit me in waves, from the loneliness of coming home every night to an empty house that used to be filled with my grandmother's laughter. But my operations manager insisted. "You need to get out," she said. "Network. Remember, there's a world outside these kitchens." So I went, and there he was. Marcus was standing by the coffee station, looking slightly lost in that way that makes women want to help. He was handsome, tall, dark hair, warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Mid-30s, wedding ring finger conspicuously bare. I noticed that immediately, because I always noticed that. He caught me looking and smiled. Not a smirk, not a leer, just a genuine, warm smile. "The coffee here is terrible," he said. "I've been trying to convince myself to drink it for 10 minutes. I laughed. "It really is. I own a bakery chain, and our break room coffee is better than this." "A bakery chain? That's impressive. Tell me more." And just like that, we talked for 3 hours. He was charming in that effortless way some men have, like being likable was just something that happened to him naturally. He said he was an architect from Virginia, specialized in restaurant design. He was at the conference scouting potential clients, learning about the industry so he could serve it better. He asked about my grandmother, about the recipes, about whether I still made her famous chess pie. He didn't ask about money. not once. Not about expansion plans, or profit margins, or real estate valuations, or investor interest. He asked about flour types, and the secret to flaky crust, and whether buttermilk really made a difference. I was so tired of men who saw dollar signs when they looked at me. Men who asked about my portfolio on first dates. Men who casually mentioned their own businesses within the first 5 minutes, clearly positioning themselves as equals who deserved access to my success. And here was this handsome architect who seemed genuinely interested in butter ratios. Looking back, that was the trap. He'd done his research. He knew exactly what kind of man I was tired of meeting. So he became the opposite. He mirrored everything I wanted, reflected my loneliness back as connection, my grief back as understanding. He was a perfect mirror, and I fell in love with my own reflection. We dated long distance for 4 months. He drove down from Virginia every other weekend. 5 hours each way, he claimed. He always arrived Friday night, left Sunday afternoon. We'd cook together in my grandmother's kitchen, take long walks through the gardens she'd planted, watch old movies on the couch where I'd sat with her 1,000 times. He fit into my life so perfectly it felt like fate. He met my mother, Patricia, once. Just once. She drove up from Wilmington for Sunday dinner. She was polite but quiet throughout the meal. She smiled at his jokes, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Afterward, when Marcus was in the bathroom, she pulled me aside by the kitchen window. "Something about him feels rehearsed," she said quietly, "like he's playing a character instead of being one. The way he laughs at exactly the right moments, the way he knows exactly what to say. It's too perfect, Olivia." I felt my defenses rise immediately. "You've known him for 3 hours, Mom." "I've known men like him for 60 years. I told her she was being dramatic, that she was still overprotective because of how badly my last relationship had ended, that she couldn't stand to see me happy with someone she hadn't personally vetted. We argued. The kind of argument where you both say things you can't take back. She left that night instead of staying over like we'd planned. We talked less after that, then even less. Eventually, just birthday texts and holiday calls. Formal, distant, polite. I chose a man I'd known for 4 months over the woman who'd raised me, who'd held me when my father left, who'd sat beside me at my grandmother's funeral and kept me from falling apart. I will regret that for the rest of my life. My mother was right. She's always been right. And I was too stubborn to see it. Marcus proposed 6 months after we met. He took me back to Charleston, to the hotel where we'd first talked, got down on one knee in the lobby, pulled out this stunning sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds. "It's an antique," he said. "I spent 6 months searching for something as unique as you. This ring is one of a kind, just like you are." I cried. Of course I cried. He slipped it on my finger, and it fit perfectly. I didn't ask how he knew my ring size. I didn't question why an architect could afford a ring that looked like it cost $30,000. I didn't wonder about any of it because I was too busy being happy. He said he was ready to relocate to North Carolina. He'd sell his architecture practice in Virginia, start fresh with me. "We can build a life together," he said. "A real life, a family." What he actually did was close a P.O. box and cancel a Google Voice number. There was no architecture practice. There was barely a Marcus Cole. But I didn't know that yet. I was too busy planning a wedding. We got married in my grandmother's garden. Small ceremony, just 30 people. I wanted more, wanted the community that had supported Magnolia Lane for decades. But Marcus preferred intimate. "I don't have much family," he said sadly. "My parents passed when I was young, only child. A few college friends who can't make the trip." I felt sorry for him. This man with no one, finally finding a home with me. I wanted to give him the family he'd never had, fill the empty spaces in his life the way he seemed to fill the empty spaces in mine. So I ignored the small things that didn't add up, explained them away because love makes you stupid and hope makes you blind, and loneliness makes you believe things you'd never believe if you weren't so desperate to not be alone. What small things? Let me count them. He paid for everything in cash, always. Restaurants, gas stations, groceries. Said he didn't trust credit cards after identity theft years ago. He had no social media, not even LinkedIn. Said he valued his privacy, that architects got stalked by clients sometimes. He never received mail, not bills, not statements, not junk. Everything was digital, he claimed. Paperless lifestyle. He never took phone calls in front of me. Always stepped outside, came back saying it was a client, a contractor, something work-related. When I tried to add him to my health insurance after the wedding, he said he preferred to keep his own plan from Virginia. Less paperwork, he said. Something about pre-existing conditions and coverage gaps. When I suggested we file taxes jointly, he had an accountant friend who advised against it. Something about liability and business owners and keeping things separate for legal protection. He never introduced me to anyone from his past. Not a single friend, not a former colleague, no one from this supposed architecture practice he'd run for years. Every explanation was reasonable on its own, but together they formed a pattern I refused to see. A man with no paper trail is either a ghost or a con artist. My husband was both. Before we continue, I want to say thank you for being here with me. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from right now. I read every single comment, and they truly make my day. Your support means everything to me. Now, back to the story. 6 months into our marriage, I got pregnant. We'd been trying casually, not tracking ovulation or stressing about timing, just letting things happen naturally. When the test showed positive, 2 pink lines appearing while I held my breath, Marcus cried. Actually cried. Held me so tight. Started planning immediately. The nursery color, the name possibilities, how he wanted to coach Little League someday, teach our kids to ride bikes, be the father he never had. I thought, this is it. This is the life I was supposed to have. This is why I waited so long, why I didn't settle for the wrong men, why I kept believing. For him, for this, for us. I didn't know that somewhere in suburban Maryland, another woman was putting her 2-year-old to bed in a house she shared with my husband. A house they'd lived in for 5 years. A marriage that had never ended. 2 children who called him Daddy and wondered why he traveled so much for work. The pregnancy made everything more real. It also made everything more suspicious. Marcus started traveling more. Work trips to Virginia, he said. Wrapping up old projects. Meeting with former clients who wanted him to consult on renovations. Couldn't just abandon people who'd trusted him for years. 3 days here, 4 days there, sometimes a whole week. He was always reachable by phone, always texted good morning and good night, always came back with gifts. Flowers for me, tiny onesies for the baby, pastries from a bakery in Richmond he claimed to love. Always had logical explanations for everything. But here's the thing about being pregnant. Your instincts sharpen. Something ancient wakes up inside you, some protective animal awareness that notices what your rational mind wants to ignore. You're not just protecting yourself anymore, you're protecting someone who can't protect themselves. I noticed that his clothes never smelled like hotel laundry. They smelled like fabric softener, a specific kind, something floral I didn't use. I noticed that he always showered immediately when he got home, before he even hugged me. Every single time. I noticed that his work calls always happened in the car or outside, never in the house. He'd see the phone light up and suddenly need fresh air. I noticed that for a man supposedly winding down an architecture practice, he never talked about architecture, not once. No blueprints on the kitchen table, no photos of projects on his phone, no client complaints or exciting designs or building permits or contractor drama. He never talked about architecture at all, unless I specifically asked. And his answers were always vague, general, the kind of things you could learn from watching one episode of a home renovation show. "How's the Hendricks project going?" I'd ask. Good, moving along. You know how these things are." No, actually, I didn't know, because he never told me. I started paying attention, really paying attention, watching him the way I watched new employees during their first week, looking for tells. And the more I watched, the more the picture fell apart. One night, 7 months pregnant, I couldn't sleep. Marcus was on another Virginia trip. I was wandering the house at 2 a.m., eating crackers, heartburn burning my throat, baby pressing on my bladder. I ended up in my grandmother's office, the room I'd converted to a home workspace. And I decided to do something I'd never done before. I searched his name. Not a casual Google search, a real investigation. Every database I could access, every People Finder site, every public record search. I'd been so careful not to be that wife, the suspicious one, the paranoid one, the one who didn't trust her husband. But I was done being careful. Marcus Cole was a ghost. The architecture license he claimed to have didn't exist in Virginia, or North Carolina, or any state. The college he said he attended, the one he mentioned casually, Virginia Tech Architecture Program, no record of a Marcus Cole graduating, or attending, or even applying. The apartment building in Richmond where he supposedly lived before we met, the one he'd described in detail, the property manager had never heard of him. No Marcus Cole had ever been a tenant. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type, but I kept going. I found him in Maryland, different last name, Marcus Whitfield, not Marcus Cole. Married to Rebecca Whitfield for 6 years. Not divorced, not separated, married. Currently, actively, right now, at this very moment. 2 children, a son 4, a daughter 2. A house in Silver Spring with a mortgage and a swing set in the backyard. A job listed as financial consultant, which appeared to mean nothing specific. A whole entire life that existed at the same time as mine, that existed right now, parallel to the life he'd built with me. I threw up. Actually vomited right there on my grandmother's office floor, on the rug she'd brought back from a trip to Morocco, the one she'd told me stories about while I sat at her feet as a child. Then I cleaned it up. Because Ashford women don't leave messes for someone else to handle, not even emotional ones, not even when their entire world is collapsing around them. I didn't confront him. I know that sounds crazy. The normal thing to do would be to call him immediately, scream, demand answers, throw things. But I was 7 months pregnant, alone in a house with a man who had been lying about his entire existence for 2 years. I didn't know what else he was lying about. I didn't know what he was capable of. I didn't know if confronting him would put me in danger, put the baby in danger. So I called my mother at 3 a.m., the woman I'd barely spoken to in over a year, the woman I'd pushed away, ignored, dismissed, the woman who'd tried to warn me and been punished for it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the second ring, not groggy, not confused, like she'd been waiting for this call. "Olivia, what's wrong?" I told her everything, every detail, every lie, every document I'd found, every terrible thing I now knew about the man sleeping beside me every night. She was silent for a long moment. I could hear her breathing, steady and calm. Finally, she spoke. "Pack a bag, a small one, just essentials. Put it somewhere he won't find it. Don't let him know anything has changed. I'm driving up first thing in the morning. We're going to handle this together. And Olivia? Yes? I love you. I've always loved you. Nothing that happened between us changes that. We'll get through this, together." For the first time since I'd started searching, I cried. Huge, heaving sobs that I had to muffle with a pillow so I wouldn't wake the whole neighborhood. "Mom, I'm so sorry. You tried to tell me. You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen. Sweetheart, that doesn't matter now. What matters is you're safe, and we're going to take this man apart, piece by piece. Now go pack that bag and try to get some sleep. You're going to need your strength." That's the thing about mothers, the real ones anyway. You can push them away, ignore their warnings, choose charming strangers over decades of unconditional love, and they still show up at your door the next morning with coffee and a plan and arms that wrap around you like nothing ever happened. My mother moved in that week. We told Marcus it was because of the pregnancy. I was having trouble sleeping, needed help around the house, felt anxious about the delivery. He seemed relieved, actually. Less time he had to spend pretending to be present. More freedom to make his phone calls outside, to take his trips to Virginia. We hired a private investigator, the best in the state, a woman named Dana Rodriguez who'd spent 20 years as an FBI agent before going private, tracking down missing persons and exposing frauds. She was expensive, worth every penny. Within 2 weeks, Dana had built a file thick enough to make a prosecutor weep with joy. Marcus Whitfield, not Cole, had done this before. I wasn't his second target. I wasn't even his third. There was a woman in Florida named Caroline Ashworth. He'd married her in 2015 while still legally married to Rebecca. Different fake name that time, different cover story, same pattern. That marriage lasted 2 years before Caroline discovered the truth and fled. She'd been too humiliated to press charges, too devastated to fight, too ashamed that she'd been fooled. She just wanted him gone, wanted to pretend the whole nightmare had never happened. He'd refined his technique since then, gotten better at picking targets, learned what worked and what didn't. Lonely women with money, women who worked too hard to date properly, women who were grieving, vulnerable, desperate for connection, women with dead relatives who'd left them something worth taking, women exactly like me. The Florida wife, Caroline, was living in Arizona now, remarried to a decent man, finally happy, trying to forget. When Dana explained what was happening, Caroline didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need," she said, "whatever I can do to stop him this time. I should have fought back then. I was just too broken. But I'm not broken anymore. I'm in." Rebecca, his actual legal wife in Maryland, was harder to reach. She was still living with him part-time, still believing his cover story about extended work trips building a client base in other states, still raising their children in a house built on lies, wondering why Daddy was gone so often, wondering why he seemed distracted when he was home. Dana approached her carefully, met her for coffee, showed her evidence slowly, gently, giving her time to absorb each piece. Rebecca's reaction was volcanic. 5 years of marriage, 2 children, a mortgage, a life built on the assumption that she knew who she was married to, all while her husband was courting, marrying, and impregnating another woman, using her children's college fund for gifts and trips, and a ring he put on my finger. "I knew something was wrong," Rebecca told Dana, tears streaming down her face. "I knew. Some part of me always knew. But he had explanations for everything. He always made me feel crazy for asking questions. He always turned it around, made me the paranoid wife, the nag, the problem. I stopped trusting my own instincts. I stopped trusting my own brain." That's what men like Marcus do. They don't just lie. They make you distrust yourself. They make you apologize for noticing the truth. They gaslight you until reality itself becomes uncertain, until you can't tell the difference between your valid concerns and their manufactured reassurances. We started planning. Not just divorce, not just exposure. Complete systematic destruction of a man who had built his entire life on manipulating women who trusted him. The legal situation was complicated. My marriage wasn't technically valid since he was still legally married to Rebecca. I wasn't his wife. I was his victim. But that didn't mean I had no recourse. He'd committed fraud, taken money from me under false pretenses, used my credit for things I never approved, potentially committed bigamy, which was still a crime in North Carolina. More importantly, he'd committed the kind of betrayal that demanded a reckoning. Dana coordinated with law enforcement in 3 states. Attorneys got involved, including a former prosecutor who specialized in fraud cases. The evidence mounted. The case built itself. And we planned the reveal for maximum impact. Because here's something I learned from my grandmother. If you're going to take someone down, you do it once, you do it completely, and you do it in a way they never recover from. Ashford women don't leave loose ends, and Marcus Whitfield had created a lot of loose ends. My baby shower was scheduled for a Saturday in September. 30 women invited, my mother's friends, my employees, loyal customers, the community that had supported Magnolia Lane for decades. Marcus would be there too, of course, playing the proud father-to-be, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, putting his arm around me for photos, being charming. He had no idea it would be the last performance of his pathetic, stolen life. The day arrived. Beautiful weather, warm but not hot. The garden looked perfect. Pink and white decorations everywhere. Balloons, streamers, a table full of gifts wrapped in ribbon, cake from our own bakery, my grandmother's famous 7-layer chocolate, the one she made for every special occasion. Marcus was charming as always, moving through the crowd, laughing at jokes, telling people how excited he was, how he couldn't wait to meet his daughter, how he was already practicing diaper changes. His hand on my back, possessive and proud. At 2 p.m., right on schedule, a car pulled up the long gravel driveway. Then another. Rebecca got out of the first one. Tall, tired, determined. She was wearing jeans and a blazer, and her jaw was set in a way that told me she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. Caroline got out of the second car. Smaller, quieter, but with the same steel in her eyes. 5 years she'd spent trying to forget what Marcus did to her. Now she was here to make sure he couldn't do it to anyone else. They walked across the lawn together, past the tables of beautifully wrapped gifts, past the champagne station with its towers of crystal glasses, past the tower of petit fours and the flower arrangements my mother had spent hours perfecting. They walked straight toward my husband. I watched his face from across the lawn, the exact moment he recognized Rebecca, the confusion, the flash of fear, then the recognition of Caroline. His skin went gray. Actually gray, like someone had reached inside him and drained the blood from his body. His charming smile froze on his face, became something grotesque. "Hello, Marcus," Rebecca said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Or should I call you Marcus Cole today? That's what you've been going by here, isn't it?" The garden went silent. 30 women frozen mid-conversation, champagne glasses suspended halfway to lips. All eyes on the 3 people by the hydrangea bushes. Marcus tried to laugh it off, his default response, charming deflection. "Rebecca, what are you doing here? Is something wrong with the kids?" "Our children are fine, Marcus. They're with my mother, because I couldn't exactly bring them to their father's other wife's baby shower, could I?" Gasps, actual gasps. I'd only heard that sound in movies before. Marcus held up his hands, still trying to manage the situation. "I don't know what you're talking about. This is my wife, Olivia. We've been married for over a year. There must be some confusion." "We've been married for 6 years, Marcus." Rebecca's voice was cold and clear. "We are still married, legally, currently, right now. You never filed for divorce because you couldn't afford one and didn't want to split assets. I have our marriage certificate. I have photos of our wedding. I have tax returns with both our names. I have 2 children who ask where their daddy is every time you leave for your business trips." Caroline stepped forward. "And he was married to me before that, while he was married to you. I was wife number 2, or maybe number 3, I'm not sure anymore. He had a different name when I knew him. Different story, same lies." She held up her phone. Photos of documents, marriage certificates, dates that overlapped like a terrible Venn diagram, proof that couldn't be explained away, couldn't be charmed away, couldn't be deflected with a laugh and a smile. Marcus turned to me, full manipulation mode now, tears already forming in his eyes, appearing on command the way they always did when he needed them. "Olivia, baby, please, you have to believe me. These women are lying. They're trying to destroy what we have. Someone must have sent them. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Let me explain." I pulled out my own folder. Thick, heavy. The investigator's report, the financial records, the property searches, the criminal background check, the interviews with former colleagues, former friends, former victims, the lies documented in black and white, every single one. "Marcus Whitfield," I said clearly, making sure everyone could hear. "Not Cole. Whitfield. Born in Baltimore in 1985. No college degree from Virginia Tech or anywhere else. No architecture license. Never had one. No architecture practice. What you do have is a gambling addiction, 3 wives at the same time at one point, outstanding debts to some very unpleasant people, and a pattern of targeting women with money who are too lonely to see through your act. I handed him a document. These are annulment papers. Since our marriage was never legal in the first place, divorce isn't necessary. You can sign them now, or you can sign them after everything else that's about to happen. Your choice. His mother-in-law, Rebecca's mother, had driven down from Maryland for this moment. She walked up behind him now, her face carved from stone. My daughter and I spent 6 years defending you to everyone who had doubts about you. 6 years of believing your lies about work trips and client emergencies. 6 years of watching my grandchildren grow up with a father who was never really there. And all this time, you were here, playing house with another woman, getting her pregnant, stealing her money. You're not a man. You're not even human. Marcus looked around wildly, at the guests staring at him with disgust, at me, standing calm and still, at his 2 other wives united against him, at the police officers walking calmly across the lawn from where they'd been waiting in the guest house. Because yes, we'd coordinated that too. 2 officers from the Raleigh PD, 2 from Maryland who'd made the trip specifically for this, a representative from the North Carolina Attorney General's office who was very interested in the fraud charges, a reporter from the local news who'd been tipped off about a major story. Marcus Whitfield, the lead officer's voice was professionally bored, like he arrested bigamist con men every day. You're under arrest for bigamy, fraud, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They cuffed him right there, in front of everyone, in my grandmother's garden where I'd married him 14 months before. Where generations of Ashford women had celebrated life's milestones. Where he'd stood at an altar and cried during vows he had no right to make, to a woman he had no right to deceive. Olivia, please, he was crying now. Real tears or fake ones, I couldn't tell anymore. I wasn't sure he knew the difference himself. I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you. Don't do this. Think about our baby. Think about our family. I looked at this man, this stranger, this con artist who had slept in my grandmother's house and eaten at her table and convinced me he was building a life when he was only building a scam, who had touched my pregnant belly and talked about the future while planning to take everything I had. You're right about one thing, Marcus, I said evenly. I am thinking about my baby. That's exactly why I'm doing this, so she never has to know what it feels like to be lied to by someone who claims to love her. They put him in the squad car. I watched it drive away, down the gravel path past the magnolia trees my grandmother planted when she was a young bride, through the iron gate she'd installed 40 years ago, the one with the Ashford family crest. Gone. The baby shower continued. Not the celebration we'd planned, but something better, something real. 30 women gathered around me and my mother, around Rebecca and Caroline. 3 women who'd been victimized by the same man, united instead of divided. We ate cake. We opened gifts. We told our stories. We laughed at the absurdity of a man who thought he could outsmart all of us at once, who thought his charm was stronger than our instincts, his lies more powerful than the truth. Rebecca stayed for dinner. We sat in my grandmother's kitchen until midnight, drinking tea and piecing together the timeline of his deception, comparing notes, filling in gaps, discovering that every sweet thing he'd ever said to me, he'd said to her first. Every romantic gesture was recycled. Every tear was performed. She wasn't the enemy. She was another victim. So was Caroline. We were all casualties of the same coward who didn't have the courage to live one honest life, so he tried to live 3 fake ones. Before I finish this story, I want to thank you for being here. If this story has touched you, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next video. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had an instinct about someone that turned out to be right? I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear your stories. Now let me tell you how this all ended. The legal process took months. Marcus pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for avoiding trial. He's currently serving 4 years in federal prison for wire fraud, identity theft, and bigamy. When he gets out, he'll be a registered felon. His name and face will follow him forever. The gambling debts he'd been hiding came due the moment his arrest made the news. The people he owed money to had been patient while he had a wealthy wife. That patience evaporated when they realized the money train had derailed. I understand he's made some unpleasant friends in prison who are connected to some of those creditors. Karma works in mysterious ways. His children, Rebecca's children, are young enough that they might not remember much of this. Rebecca is raising them on her own now, with help from her mother. She's filed for divorce, finally. The assets are complicated, but there aren't many left to divide. She seems lighter now, relieved, like a weight she'd been carrying for years has finally been lifted. Caroline sent me a gift when my daughter was born, a silver rattle with a note that said, "For the newest survivor, welcome to the sisterhood." I cried when I read it. Good tears. The divorce, well, annulment, was finalized in record time. His lawyers tried to negotiate, but there was nothing to negotiate with. The prenup I'd insisted on, the one he'd signed while pretending to be someone else, was void anyway. So was everything else. Every promise, every plan, every future we'd discussed. All of it built on sand. My daughter was born 6 weeks after the baby shower. I named her Eleanor, after my grandmother. 8 pounds, 2 ounces, with my mother's dark hair and what I hope is my grandmother's stubborn chin. She's perfect. Absolutely perfect. She'll never know her biological father. Not really. That's a conversation for when she's older, if she ever wants to have it. What she'll know is that she's an Ashford, that she comes from a line of women who built something from nothing, who survived betrayals that would have destroyed weaker people, who refused to be defined by the men who tried to diminish them. My mother moved into the guest house permanently. We have breakfast together every morning in the kitchen where my grandmother used to make biscuits. She helps with Eleanor while I run the business. We're making up for lost time. We don't talk about the 2 years we wasted fighting over a man who wasn't worth a single one of those tears. We're too busy building something better. Last month, I stood in the same spot in my grandmother's garden where Marcus had been arrested. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. Eleanor was asleep in her stroller. My mother was inside, making dinner. I thought about everything I'd lost. 2 years of my life, my trust, my confidence in my own judgment, the peaceful pregnancy I should have had, the partner I thought I'd found. But I also thought about what I'd gained, my mother back, a daughter I adore, a community that rallied around me when I needed it most, a strength I didn't know I had until I needed to use it. I learned something from all of this that I want to share with you. Trust your instincts. Trust your mother. Trust the voice inside you that says something is wrong, even when you can't prove it. Women are taught to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to not be paranoid or suspicious or difficult. That conditioning almost cost me everything. It made me ignore red flags the size of billboards. It made me choose a charming stranger over my own mother. It made me feel crazy for noticing things that were obviously, objectively wrong. Never again. I'd rather be paranoid than victimized. I'd rather be difficult than deceived. I'd rather trust myself too much than trust a man who doesn't deserve it. My grandmother used to say that Ashford women are like magnolias, beautiful on the outside, but underneath, tougher than anyone expects, built to survive storms that knock down weaker things, roots that go deep, branches that bend but never break. Marcus Whitfield thought he found an easy mark, a lonely baker with too much money and not enough skepticism. What he actually found was a magnolia in full bloom, surrounded by other magnolias, all of us rooted in the same unshakable ground. And now he's got 4 years in a cell to think about that mistake. I'm writing this from my grandmother's kitchen. Eleanor is asleep in the nursery upstairs, in the crib my grandmother bought 30 years ago when my mother was pregnant with me. My mother is in the garden, planting new roses for spring. The business is thriving. The house is peaceful. Life is good. Not the life I planned. Not the fairy tale I thought I was getting when a charming man asked me about pie crust at a conference in Charleston. But something better. Something real. Something built on truth instead of lies. And that's worth more than any con man could ever steal. Marcus Whitfield took 2 years of my life. He took my trust. He took my peace. But he couldn't take what really mattered. My family, my strength, my grandmother's legacy, my daughter's future. He tried to plant himself in our garden like he belonged there, but we pulled him out by the roots. And the magnolias are blooming brighter than ever. Thank you so much for watching. I hope Olivia's story resonated with you. If you've ever been deceived by someone you trusted, know that you're not alone. And know that it says everything about them and nothing about you. More of my most powerful stories are on your screen right now. Click one and keep watching. I promise you won't regret it. See you in the next video.